Speaker, the President of the United States.
It is better to be alone than to be in bad company. This means that you are better off alone than with bad people. Good morning, kids and parents of Room 14. I'm George Washington, the first President of the United States of America. I was President for 2 terms, from 1789 to 1797, and man, it has been a long time since I was President, but more time updating my Facebook, right? No, I was born on February 22nd, 1732 in Westmoreland County, Virginia, and we didn't have the internet. I had a private tutor when I was young, however, I did not go to college. I married Martha Dandridge Custis. Martha and I never had children together, but we raised Martha's 2 surviving children, Patsy and John. My parents' names were Augustine and Mary Ball Washington. I was a surveyor at age 16, and that is super young for a surveyor. But that was not my only job. Before I was president, I was also a planter. I fought in the Revolutionary War, and was the only president who was a lieutenant general. I fought against King George III and the Redcoats. I was always known as being an honest person. There's a myth about me that goes like this. George, did you cut down the cherry tree? Yes, Father, 'twas I who cut down the cherry tree. That is not true, but does sound like something I would say. I'm still the only president to earn 100% of the electoral votes. I was voted in unanimously. In my 8 years in office, I did many great things. I consider my greatest accomplishment stemming from my time as president to be some of the structure created for our country. I hope this structure will be in place for years to come. Things such as the creation of the first United States cabinet, the executive branch, and the basic outline of the federal court system. I feel these structures are most important as we are a young country and the future leaders will need this foundation in order to continue to build this great nation. On April 22nd, 1793, I issued the Proclamation of Neutrality, declaring the United States neutral in the conflict between France and Great Britain. During the French Revolution, although the proclamation was strongly opposed by many, it not only preserved America's trade relations, but also protected the U.S. from harm, as it was still a young nation with a young army. I was the only president that never lived in the White House. I returned to my huge mansion called Mount Vernon that was 8,000 acres following my time in Philadelphia. I worked hard to restore my home and land, but fell ill only 2 years after I left office. I would like to be remembered as a leader who cared for my country very much. Thank you, Room 14, for attending my speech.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
I must study politics and more that my sons may have liberty to study mathematics and philosophy. This means that I had to study politics and more so that I could fight for freedom in order for my sons to be able to study whatever they chose. Good morning, Room 14. My name is John Adams. I was born October 30, 1735 in Braintree, Massachusetts, on a small farm. I was a good learner in school and went to Harvard University for college. I became a lawyer and was a teacher and surveyor as well. Soon after that, I married Abigail Smith. I had 5 children with her. Their names were Abigail Adams, John Adams, Susanna Adams, Charles Adams, and Thomas Adams. We also had a horse and 2 dogs. Before my presidency, I was a vice president and helped Thomas Jefferson and 3 others write the Declaration of Independence. I also designed the United States flag. Soon after that, during the Revolutionary War, I worked with leaders in countries of Europe. After Washington retired from being president, I ran for president against Thomas Jefferson. In the end, I beat Jefferson and became the 2nd president of the United States and the 1st president to live in the White House. I only lived in it for a little less than a year, though. Although I defeated Jefferson, he became vice president. That was the one time ever a president and vice president were from different parties. He was from the Democratic Republican. I was from the Federalist. Once I got into office, I started the XYZ affair. It was a serious crisis with France and was a diplomatic dispute that came head-to-head after France tried to bribe American diplomats. Many people wanted war with France. I chose to declare war despite the battles already on the seas. In 1799, I reopened negotiations with France. Near the end of that year, I had secured an agreement conflict. Unfortunately, I ended up defusing the the political crisis at home. After being president, I went back to my home in Braintree, Massachusetts to enjoy a peaceful summer. On July 4th, 1826, I died at the age of 91. I had many life accomplishments, such as helping Thomas Jefferson write the Declaration of Independence and the XYZ affair. Remember, I was a good citizen to my people and was a lawyer, teacher, surveyor, and the second president of the United States of America. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening to my speech.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
The advice nearest to my heart and deepest in my convictions is that the union of the states be cherished and perpetuated. This quote means to me that I want people from other states to be united, prosper, and live in peace. Hello, Room 14. I'm James Madison, and I was the 4th President of the United States. I was born on March 16, 1751 in Port Conway, Virginia. My parents' names are James Madison Sr. and Eleanor Conway Madison. Some accomplishments before becoming president is that I went to Princeton University in New Jersey. I was also a farmer, lawyer, and author. I also worked on the Virginia Bill of Rights and Constitution. Another thing I did was marry Dolly Payne Todd, but I had no children. I was often sick as a kid, but loved to read and go to school. But I had epilepsy, which means I had seizures, and I called it the falling down disease. I was the oldest out of 12 children, but 5 died at young age. Some accomplishments when I was president is that I was Democrat and a Republican. I also helped create the United States of America. When I was living in the White House, the English burned down the White House, but Dolly saved a portrait of George Washington. When I was the president, Francis Scott Key wrote the Star-Spangled Banner. Also, when I was president, there was the War of 1812. In 1817, I returned home to Montpelier, Virginia, and James Monroe became president. Some life accomplishments are that there is a high school and college named after me. I am also on the $5,000 bill, which is very rare. I was one of the shortest presidents, but helped build the USA. When I was president, there was no California, but all the East Coast was built. Sadly, on June 28, 1836, I died. I had a nice and long life. I was 85 years old when I died. I want to be remembered as a man who, although had a disease, would never stop fighting, and that fighting was for the Constitution. Thank you for listening to my speech.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
The earth was given to mankind to support the greatest number of which it is capable, and no tribe or people have a right to withhold from the wants of others than more than is necessary for their own support and comfort. This quote means that you should be happy about what you have, and you shouldn't have to ask for more. Hello, boys and girls of Room 14. I am James Monroe, and I was the 5th President of the United States. I was born on April 28, 1758 in Virginia. I went to the College of William and Mary. I married Elizabeth Courtright in 1812. I took part in trying to stop slavery not only in the United States but all around the world. I was the only president to be hurt in the Revolutionary War. I was the first president to ride a steamboat. My political party is Democratic and Republican. During my second term, 5 states joined the Union: Mississippi, Illinois, Maine, Missouri, and Alabama. Before I was president, I served in the military, was a minister, was a senator, was a governor, and was in Congress. I signed the Declaration of Independence. I was president from March 4th, 1817 to March 4th, 1825. My vice president was Daniel D. Tompkins. I was president at age 59. During my presidency, I let slaves free that were bought in Spain.
I spoke French, English, and Italian. My nickname was the last cocked hat. I helped write the Constitution. Again, I was the only president to be hurt in the Revolutionary War. And please remember that I took part in trying to stop slavery all around the world. Thank you, boys and girls of Route 14, for listening to my speech.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
I, John Quincy Adams, say that slavery is a great and foul stain upon the North American Union, and that slaves should be free. This means slavery is good for the whites and bad for the blacks. I was born July 11th, 1767, and was born in Braintree, Massachusetts. My college was Harvard College. I married Louise Johnson and had no children, but Louisa got pregnant 19 times in 22 years. Before I was president, I was a profession at being a lawyer and a college professor. I was the minister of the Netherlands and Great Britain. I also helped sign the Monroe Doctrine. I was elected to the House of Representatives. I was the only president to do so. I was the first politician to begin the war against slavery, eliminating the gag rule. Thank you for listening to my speech.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
One man with courage makes a majority. I think this quote means that if you're brave enough to risk your life for other people, then you are important. Hello, I am Andrew Jackson, 7th President of the United States. I was born March 5th, 1762, in a log cabin at Waxhaw District, South Carolina. I was in the military and a lawyer. The Revolutionary War started when I was 8 years old. At age 13, I joined the military and got captured and taken prisoner. Finally, the British let me go. I was also a general in the War of 1812. In those wars, I got shot 3 times. One of the bullets stands 1 inch away from my heart. I survived all the shot attempts. I was the first president to be born in a log cabin, ride a train, and nominate a political party. I'm the only president to pay off the national debt, held as prisoner of war, and served both the Revolutionary and the War of 1812. I was married to Rachel Donelson Roberts in 1791. We adopted a child. Other than that, we did not have any children. I died June 8, 1845 at age 78. In 1787, I earned my license for practicing the law after going to school at Salisbury, North Carolina. In 1797, I was elected to Congress. I was elected to Senate in 1797. I became a judge for Supreme Court in Tennessee in 1798. I was elected Major General of the militia. I gave government jobs in my own party. This was very important because most people didn't have jobs. One reason why is because America is a beginning country, so lots of people are coming and there are very little farms and buildings. As I was president, I supported a strong central government that prevented nullifying national laws. This was very difficult for me during my first term because Vice President John C. Calhoun opposed this effort within the White House. I would like to be remembered as a great soldier and a person who liked to get in duels. Thank you for listening to my speech.
Woo! Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
We must ever maintain the principle that the people of this continent alone have the right to decide their own destiny. The meaning of this quote gives everybody freedom and independence to do what they want no matter who they are. Hello, boys and girls of room 14. It is a great pleasure to be here today to present to you my speech. I am James Knox Polk, the 11th President of the USA. I was born on November 2nd, 1795 in Mecklenburg County, North Carolina. I would get sick very often, so I was homeschooled, and I did not go to school until I was 17, when I went to the University of North Carolina. I was married to Sarah Childress Polk in 1824, and I didn't have any children. My parents, Samuel and Jane Polk, farmed our land. I had 9 siblings, and I was the oldest. As you know, I would get sick very often, so I could not help on the farm. In 1815, I entered the University of North Carolina, and I graduated as top student. In 1820, I passed the bar exam and became a lawyer. In 1823, I ran for the Tennessee House of Representatives and won the election. I voted against a law to use the government's money to build roads and canals in states. I thought that taking away money from the federal government would take away the state's independence. I also won the election for the United States House of Representatives 7 times. In 1832, I was elected chairman of the Committee on Ways and Means. In 1835, I became Speaker of the House. Later that year, I voted against the Distribution Act. This act divided the nation's surplus money between the states. In 1839, I was elected governor of Tennessee. I eliminated more than $1 million in debt. I also eliminated the amount of paper money banks could print. Despite being a dark horse Democratic candidate, I won the election in 1844 and became the 11th President of the United States. I took office on March 4th, 1845, becoming the youngest president. After becoming president, I wanted to establish a border between Oregon and Canada. I also wanted to make Texas and California part of the U.S. Oregon Territory, which was then owned jointly by Britain and the U.S., but I wanted it only for the U.S. But England did not want to give it up. In 1846, the Oregon Treaty was signed between England and the U.S. They compromised and agreed that Oregon's borders would be along the 49th parallel. In 1846, when the U.S. and Mexico couldn't agree on Texas's borders, I sent U.S. troops to protect Texas from the Mexicans. On May 13, 1846, I declared war on Mexico. In 1848, 2 years and many battles later, the U.S. won the war. I wrote a treaty called the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, where the U.S. gave $15 million to Mexico for Texas, and we also got California, Nevada, Utah, and parts of 6 other states. I was delighted to have the new territory for the U.S. As a president, I achieved most of my goals. I was the only president to have been Speaker of the House of Representatives. I was the first president that expanded the country from the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean. The Oregon Territory became Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and parts of Montana and Wyoming. In addition to Texas, the land I purchased from Mexico became California, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, Utah, and parts of Colorado and Wyoming. In 1848, I announced that gold had been found in California, which led to the California Gold Rush. I did not seek re-election in 1848 since my health was deteriorating. 3 months after I left office, I died on June 15, 1849, of cholera at 53 in Nashville, Tennessee. I want you to remember that I was one of the most important political leaders of the U.S. I expanded the country from coast to coast. I improved the economy of our country, and I worked hard to support the Democratic Party. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
A house divided against itself will not stand, which means people need to come together to make great things happen. My name is Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States. I was born on February 12, 1809 in Hodgenville, Kentucky. I married Mary Todd Lincoln on November 4, 1865. I had 4 great boys. Sadly, 3 of them died. Tad died from pneumonia, Edward died from cancer, and Willie died from high fever. But luckily, our last son, Robert, lived to his adulthood. My parents were Thomas Lincoln, Nancy Hates Lincoln, and my stepmother, Sarah B. J. Lincoln. I had lots of pets, such as 1 pig, a dog named Fredo, 2 ponies belonging to Whaley and Tad, a white rabbit, Nanny and Nanko the goats, Jack and Todd the turkeys, another dog named Jip, cats including Tabby and Ditzy. Here are some of my accomplishments before becoming president. I became a lawyer. I was self-educated and served in the Black Hawk War. These accomplishments were important to me because I love to learn and because I wanted to protect my country and all the people in it. Here are some accomplishments while I was in presidency. I started the Homestead Act of 1853. I signed the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863. I ended slavery and set them free. These accomplishments were important to me because no one else had the courage to set the slaves free. But sadly, while being in my presidency, my life was cut short by John Wilkes Booth in Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. at the age of 56. And this is how I would like to be remembered. As for a man who wanted equal rights for all and a person who freed the slaves. And that I was an honest man for my family and my country. Thank you, Room 14, for listening to my speech.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
It is impossible to get along with such a man in such a position, and I can't stand it no longer, Johnson said. Johnson felt mad because Edward Stanton lied to him and misled him about evidence about Mary Suet. That guy got a lady executed. Also, Andrew Johnson was... Wait. Let me tell you about President Andrew Johnson. He was the 17th President of the United States of America. He was born in Raleigh, North Carolina. He was born on December 29th, 1808.
1808. And President Johnson met Eliza McCarthy, and they married on May 17, 1827. Together they had 5 children: Martha, Mary, Robert, Charles, and Andrew. Andrew Johnson taught himself to read and write. He didn't go to school because his family didn't have enough money. Once he got married, his wife taught him to read and write better. Before becoming a politician, he was a tailor's apprentice. A local man read to him while Johnson worked. The man gave Johnson the book of speeches. He kept it for his whole entire life. He later opened his own tailor shop in Greenville. Soon after becoming a tailor, he was elected to Greenville Town Council and then mayor of Greenville. Johnson was next elected to the Tennessee and the U.S. House of Representatives. They wanted to build the railroads, but Andrew Johnson didn't want that. Once he became governor, he helped improve the public school systems. At that time, Andrew Johnson was for the people. A day after President Lincoln's assassination, April 15, 1865, Johnson was sworn in as president. Johnson was a member of the Democrat political party. With the help of William Seward, Johnson purchased Alaska from Russia for 2 cents per acre for most of his presidency. Johnson and Congress did not agree on a lot of issues. Johnson made bad decisions, and as a result was impeached. The Johnson family returned home to Greenville, but Andrew was never really done with politics. After years of campaigning, he was finally elected in January 1875 as the only former president to become U.S. Senator after leaving the White House shortly after he became ill and died, July 31, 1875. Andrew Johnson was a brave and courageous man. He was raised out of a poor family, taught himself to read and write, owned a tailor shop, and became president. Andrew Johnson has taught me that if I work hard and believe in myself, I can be president or whatever I want to do or become. Now you know about Andrew Johnson.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
The art of war is simple enough. Find out where your enemy is, get to him as soon as you can, and strike him as hard as you can, and keep moving on. This is my definition of how to fight war. First, you establish your enemy, then you fight, and once you win, move on to the next battle. My name is Ulysses S. Grant, but you can call me Ulyss. I was the 18th president of the USA. I was born in Point Pleasant, Ohio, on April 27, 1822. I started school at Georgetown at age 5. Then I went to the Presbyterian Academy. I didn't like that academy because I already knew most of the lessons taught there. I eventually went to a U.S. military academy at West Point, where I trained to be a soldier. I married Julia Dent and had 4 children.
Before being president, I fought in the Mexican and Civil War. In the Civil War, I fought Confederate troops in Chattanooga. I rescued Union soldiers, and this brought me a lot of fame. Unfortunately, I was part of many bloody battles, and my nickname was Grant the Butcher. I kept fighting and cornered the Confederate Army, which led the end of the Civil War. The Republican Party admired my achievements in the Civil War, and I was nominated for president. I beat my opponent in 1886. In 1868. My major accomplishments are creating a better currency and helping pass the 15th Amendment. Before I was president, the United States used greenbacks, a type of paper currency. I switched it to gold, which is more stable. My other accomplishments is helping pass the 15th Amendment. It gave freed slaves the right to vote. I also passed the Force Acts, which protected the rights of freed slaves. I died of throat cancer in 1885. I would like to be remembered not only for being president, but for being an Army general too. Thank you, boys and girls, for listening to my speech.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
I believe in the American opportunity which puts the starry sky above every boy's head, and sets my foot upon a ladder which I may climb till my strength goes out. What this quote means to me is I can climb a ladder to put the American dream on every boy and girl. I added 6 new states to the United States, which are North Dakota, South Dakota, Washington, Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming, more than any other president. Hello, boys and girls of Room 14. I am Benjamin Harrison, the 23rd President of the United States of America. I was born August 20th, 1833, in North Bend, Ohio, with my brothers Carter, John, and Archibald, and my sisters Elizabeth, Mary, Anna, and Anna. When I was 7, my grandfather, William Henry Harrison, was the 9th president. I went to college at the age 14 at Carey's Academy, near Cincinnati. In my 3rd year of college, I transferred to Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. I graduated from college in 1852. After I graduated from college, I moved to Cincinnati to study law. In 1853, I married Caroline Scott, and we moved to Indianapolis, Indiana. I opened my own law office in Indianapolis. My business grew slowly. I needed to earn more money, so I took a job as a court crier. A court crier is someone who shouts out important announcements. It paid $2.50 a day. I had 3 children, but my last child died at birth. In 1854, I had my first child named Russell. In 1858, I had my second child named Mary. And in 1861, I had my 3rd child that died at birth. I was in the Civil War. I was a Civil War hero. On July 1st, President Abraham Lincoln called for volunteers to fight in the war. In 1888, Democrat President Governor Cleveland ran for re-election. The Republicans chose me to run against him. The Republicans chose New York banker Levi P. Morton to be my vice president. We won. The first Pan-American Conference was held in Washington, D.C. in 1889. I helped create trade arguments between the U.S. and Latin American countries. I signed the Sherman Antitrust Act in 1890. To prevent a single group of owners from controlling a whole industry, I tried to protect American businesses with a high tariff. I also agreed to protect the island of Samoa. I worked to gain control of land of Panama so the United States could build a canal or waterway to link the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. In 1892, I decided to run for re-election. Although I was making important gains for the country, some people still did not like me. I was sad that I did not win, but I was glad that I was able to run for one time. I returned to my home in Indiana in March 1893. I practiced law and wrote for magazines. In 1897, I also published a book on the federal government titled This Country of Ours. I lived another 4 years. I died on March 13, 1901. To review, I was a hero in the Civil War and I ran for re-election. I made a book called This Country of Ours and I wrote for magazines. And remember that I was a hero in the Civil War. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
It's the responsibility of the citizens to support its government. It is not the responsibility of the citizens to support its government. Good morning, boys and girls. My name is Grover Cleveland, and I was the 22nd and 24th President of the United States. I was born March 18th, 1837. In Caldwell, New Jersey, and died June 24th, 1908. I was married to Frances Folsom Cleveland, and we had 5 children. I never attended college, but my political party was Democratic. Before I was a president, I was a school teacher at the Institute for the Blind. I was also a New York lawyer. I ran for many public offices and was voted in as an assistant district attorney of Erie County, sheriff of Erie County, where I had to hang 2 people for a murder. I was a mayor of Buffalo in New York, and I got a nickname, and it was Veto Mayor. That's where I stopped a corrupt city councilman who tried to pass bad laws. And I was governor of New York. Let me rise or fall. I'm going to work. Let me rise or fall. I'm going to work for the interests of people. That was a famous quote said by me. Of the state, regardless of my party or anything else. I had many accomplishments as president. I dedicated the Statue of Liberty. I supported the development of the USDA, which helps the U.S. farmers, and I repealed the Sherman Silver Purchase Act. This strengthened the value of the U.S. dollar. I vetoed more than 300 bills. This is more than all the previous presidents combined. I was the first president to get married in the White House. I married Frances Folsom, who was 21 years old, and I was 49 years old. My best friend died, and I became her guardian when she was 11 years old. I was the first president to have a child in the White House. Here are some other presidential
accomplishment I am proud of. I am the only president to serve two non-consecutive terms. I had a secret operation aboard a yacht to remove cancer from the roof of my mouth, smoking cigars. I refused to allow plantation owners to steal land from Hawaii. I had 4 more children. I lost my firstborn, Ruth, to diphtheria. And at age 12. My final words before dying were, "I tried so hard to do the right thing." My final nickname became Rover the Good. I wanted to be remembered as a man who always told the truth, for being fair and standing up against corruption, for vetoing laws that supported the rich, and for lowering tariffs on imports. Thank you for listening to my speech.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
With self-discipline, most anything is possible. This quote means that you could do anything as long as you put your mind to it. And that is what I did. I am Theodore Roosevelt, the 26th President of the United States. I was born on October 27th, 1858, in New York City. When I was young, I liked reading and writing books. By the time I grew up, I wrote over 40 books. My first wife was Alice Lee, but sadly she died on the same day as my mother. We had one child named Alice Lee Jr. My second wife, Edith Kermit, and we had 5 more kids named Kermit, Theodore, Ethel, Archibald, and Quentin. Before I was president, I was the Assistant Secretary of the Navy, but quit the job so I could lead the Rough Riders, which is a horseback riding group of soldiers. We fought the Spanish Army in Cuba. The Rough Riders helped to win the war. This is important because we helped the Cubans win their independence. When I came home, everyone called me a hero. I was very popular, and soon I was elected the governor of New York. I was asked to run with McKinley as vice president, and we won. I became vice president at age 42, but the president was shot and killed, and I became the 26th president of the United States, the youngest president to date. I love nature, camping, and hunting. As president, I protected nature, and I established 5 national parks, 150 national forests, 51 federal bird reserves, 4 national game reserves, and 18 national monuments. Another of my great accomplishments was the Panama Canal. It was one of the largest and most difficult building projects ever. It greatly reduced the amount of time for ships to travel between the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. It was called one of the 7 wonders of the modern world. Not to brag, I also won the Nobel Peace Prize for helping end the Russian-Japanese War. I would like to be remembered for helping my country and protecting nature for the future. I am one of the youngest presidents to hold office, a Nobel Peace Prize winner, Medal of Honor soldier for the Battle of San Juan Hill. Also, my face is carved on Mount Rushmore. I'm kind of a big deal. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening to my speech.
Speaker, the President of the United States.
I believe in democracy because it releases the energies of every human being. To me, this means that people get excited about having a say. I am Woodrow Wilson, and I am the 28th president. I was born in Virginia in 1856. When I was young, the Civil War was happening, so I was not able to start going to school until I was 9 years old. In school, I had a lot of trouble learning how to read at first, but I was always really interested in social studies. I attended Princeton University for college, and I also went to law school. I only practiced law for less than 1 year because I thought it was boring. Since I didn't want to be a lawyer, I decided to go to Johns Hopkins University to earn my PhD in political science. After school, I got married to my first wife, Ellen Axon. Together, we had 3 children. Sadly, my wife, Ellen, passed away, but I got remarried to Edith Wilson a few years later. After graduating with my PhD, I became a professor at Princeton University. I was one of the most popular teachers there for 12 years, and then I became president of the university in 1902. Since I did a great job leading the university, my friends convinced me to run for governor of New Jersey. I was governor of New Jersey from 1911 to 1913. Next, I decided to run for president of the United States as a member of the Democratic Party. I was elected as president of the United States on March 4th, 1913, and I was the leader of our country until 1921. I had many accomplishments during my 2 terms. As soon as I became president, I worked with the Congress to help pass the new laws. The first law that the Congress and I passed was called the Underwood Tariff Act. This act made things that we buy cheaper for Americans, which also meant that the government got less money. Shortly after, the 16th Amendment was approved, which made Americans pay an income tax, so that the government had enough money. Another one of my favorite laws was passed during my presidency. It was the 19th Amendment. This new law gave women the right to vote. I didn't think it was fair for only men to vote, so we passed this law so women could have a say too. Another important accomplishment that I had during my presidency was the fact I led our country during World War I. I helped to end the war by giving a speech about a peace plan. I received a Nobel Peace Prize for my work on this plan. World War I officially ended on June 28, 1919. Shortly after the war ended, I had a stroke and I became paralyzed. The Congress and my wife had to help me carry out my presidential duties for the rest of my term. There are 4 important facts that I think everyone should remember about me. First, I was president of the United States for 2 terms, from 1913 to 1921. Second, the law that gave women the right to vote was passed during my presidency. Third, I led our country during World War I. And finally, I won the Nobel Peace Prize for the peace plan I wrote to help end World War I. I always tried my best to be an honest and fair leader, which made me one of America's greatest presidents. Thank you for listening to my speech.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
No person was ever honored for what he received. Honor has been the reward for what he gave. I think this means if you get an award, people are not clapping for what you got, they're clapping for what you did. I'm Calvin Coolidge, the 30th President of the United States. Here is my picture. I was born on the 4th of July in 1972 in Plymouth, Vermont. I had one sister, her name was Abby, and she was my best friend. My parents were John and Victoria Coolidge. When I was 12 years old, my mom died. Then a few years later, my sister was very sick, and the doctor said that she would die. She was only 15 when she died. In 1895, I graduated from the Amherst College in Massachusetts. In 1905, I married Grace Ann Goodhue, who was a teacher in the school for deaf. We had 2 sons, John and Calvin Jr. Before I was president, I was a lawyer, mayor, governor, and vice president. I was a Republican. In 1919, there was a big police strike in Boston, and I had to step in to restore law and order. My actions led to my nomination for vice president. In 1920, President Warren Harding and I won the election in a landslide. But then, on August 2nd, 1923, President Harding died suddenly of heart failure while he was traveling in California. I was the vice president, so I had to take over as president for the rest of his term. Now at age 51, I was president of the United States. When that term ended, I was nominated again for president in 1924. I was excited to run for president, but then tragedy struck. My two sons went out to play tennis. Calvin Jr., who was 16, was in a hurry, so he put on his tennis shoes without socks. Because of this, he got a blister on his toe, which became infected. The White House doctors were called in to treat my son, but it was too late. Calvin Jr. died of blood poisoning. After that, I didn't feel much like campaigning anymore. Yet I won the election by a landslide. I won a popular vote out of 2.5 million over the other two candidates combined. This map shows how the states voted. The red states are the states where I won. So for the next 4 years, I was president. I spoke out in favor of equal rights. I refused to appoint any known members of the Ku Klux Klan to office. I appointed African Americans to government positions, and I supported the anti-lynching laws. In 1924, I gave full citizenship rights to all Native Americans. In the summer of 1927, I was still overwhelmed with sadness over the death of my son. I didn't want to be president anymore, so I gave a short statement saying I do not choose to run for president in 1928. 4 years later, when I was only 60 years old, I died from heart failure, but most people think I died of a broken heart. Thank you for listening to my speech.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Hello, I am Franklin Delano Roosevelt. I am the 32nd President of the United States of America. I was born on January 30th, 1882 in Hyde Park, New York. In 1904, I graduated from Harvard University. While I was in Harvard, I was studying history, economics, and science. Later on, I married Eleanor Roosevelt on March 17, 1905. My kids are Anna Roosevelt, James Elliott Roosevelt, and Franklin Jr. In 1907, I began working as a lawyer in New York City, but then the job became boring, so I began thinking about working in politics. Democrats leaders began looking to hire me, and they thought I'd become a good leader. They asked me to run for a Senate in 1910. I made many speeches, and voters began to elect me as a Senate. In 1917, we entered World War I. I supported the war against Germany, and I worked hard to get the Navy bigger and stronger, and I wasn't even in office. In 1920, the Democrats chose Governor James Cox of Ohio to be a presidential candidate. The Democrats chose me to become vice president. When I was 39, I had my legs paralyzed by a disease called polio. In November 1933, I was elected president, beating Herbert Hoover. I was the longest-serving president. and I served for 12 years, which is 4 terms. When I was in office, I set up training programs for people who fought in World War II. I found out that my blood or marriage, I was related to other presidents like George Washington, John Quincy Adams, James Madison, Martin Van Buren, William and Benjamin Harrison, Zachary Taylor, Ulysses S. Grant, Theodore Roosevelt, and William Howard Taft. When I was 8, I began a stamp collection, and when I was in office, I kept collecting stamps, and so I hired people because I got a little too old to go out and get some stamps when I was president. And then in my presidency, many people were struggling without jobs. So I asked the government if they had anything they need for the country. And so the people began working on buildings and other structures. My life was cut short and I passed away from a stroke. If you ever get sad and miss me, just go to your wallet and take out the famous 10-cent coin, and there's my beautiful face. Thank you for listening to my speech.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
I promised the American people a speedy victory and an end to World War II. I said this because of the people dying each day. I cared about the lives of American soldiers. Hello, Rinehart students. My name is Harry S. Truman, the 33rd President of the United States of America. I was born May 8, 1884. My family is John, Martha, Elizabeth, and Mary. When I was 9, I got my first pair of glasses. I was not good at sports, but I loved to play the piano. I got up 2 hours before school every day to practice the piano. In 1920, I invested in a clothing company. It made money for 2 years. My first job in politics was the Jackson County judge. In 1934, I decided to run for the U.S. Senate. And guess what, students? I won. The people really liked my ideas. Therefore, I worked hard, gained people's respect, and was re-elected in 1940. One day in 1944, while I was serving as vice president, I thought this is pretty cool. In 1945, I became president of the United States. I warned Japan about the atomic bomb. However, they did not listen, and people were dying every day. I made one of the hardest decisions in world history by dropping the atomic bomb on Japan. The bomb destroyed the city of Hiroshima. 3 days later, on August 9, 1945, I told our troops to drop a second atomic bomb on Japan. This was a major decision for the country and me. We needed the war to end. The second atomic bomb destroyed the city of Nagasaki. On September 2, 1945, Japan surrendered, and the war was finally over. The U.S. was victorious. I grew up fast, but I was smart enough to handle it. Sports was not my thing, and I could not see well, but music and politics was where I thrived. I want to be remembered as a loving husband, caring father, and great president. Thank you for listening to my speech.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. I think this quote means to have leadership and take charge. Hello, peoples of Chaparral. Thank you for waking me up from my 50-year nap of death. My name is John Fitzgerald Kennedy, the 35th President of the USA. I was in the presidency for 1,000 days before I got shot. I was born on May 29th, 1917 in Brooklyn, Massachusetts. My parents' names were Joseph P. Kennedy, that was my father, and my mother was Rose Kennedy. Plus, my kids' names were John F. Kennedy Jr. and Patrick Bovere Kennedy. They're my sons, and my daughter's names are Arabella Kennedy and Caroline Kennedy. Okay, now let's get started. Here's one good accomplishment before I became president. When I was younger, I got a back injury playing football, and I wanted to join the Navy, but I couldn't, so I did some exercise with weights on my back. My back improved so much that I got to join the Navy. Over the 3 years and 6 months in the Navy, I was awarded the Navy and Marine Corps Medal for Heroism in World War II. I got the medal for bravery. I helped this guy because he got burnt really badly when our ship got rammed by a Japanese destroyer. We had to swim 3 miles to shore and get some help quick. Here are 5 good accomplishments while being in the presidency. I made an awesome speech called Ask Not, and I was the first Catholic president ever. I prevented nuclear war against the Soviet Union. I inspired people to do public services out on the streets. After I made the speech called Ask Not, I established the Peace Corps. It's where young Americans, like at age 20 to 28, go to other countries and make peace. We won the space race in 1969. Sadly, I was not alive, but back to speech. I asked the Congress to give me $7 billion to $9 billion to transform a space company called NASA. These accomplishments that I made inspired and helped a lot of people. This space race was important to me because I helped put a man in space, but I was already dead. While I was still president, I got shot in the head and the neck, and I died 30 minutes later in Dallas, Texas, November 22nd, 1963. I would not just like to be remembered for being the first Catholic president. I would like to be remembered for my 5 accomplishments that I made. I prevented nuclear war against the Soviet Union. I inspired people to do public services. I made Peace Corps, and we won the space race. Thank you, 3rd graders of Chaparral, for listening to my speech. Now time for my question.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
Always remember that others may hate you, but those who hate don't win unless you hate them back, and then you destroy yourself. I said this during my White House farewell speech. I think this means hating others is damaging yourself. You shouldn't let anyone else's opinion bother you. My name is Richard Nixon, and I'm the 37th President of the United States. I was born January 9th in 1913 in Yorba Linda, California, which is about 100 miles from San Diego. I went to Whittier College and then Duke University School of Law. I married my wife, Pat Nixon, on June 21st, 1940, and we had 2 children named Tricia and Julie. I was the second of 5 sons to my parents, Francis and Hannah Nixon. My dad owned a lemonade grove and then started a gas station and a grocery store. When I was old enough, I helped out with the family store. I attended Duke University Law School in North Carolina because I wanted to become a lawyer. I was elected president of the student body there as well as the president of the Duke Bar Association. I graduated 3rd in my class in 1937. After law school, I returned to California to practice law, but then World War II started. I joined the Navy and I was a Navy lieutenant commander. That helped me with my leadership skills. After leaving service, I was elected Congress for the California district. That really changed my life because I became famous. I was known as a hard worker, and I worked so hard that I won the Senate seat in 1950 at the age of 38. I was the youngest senator. After that, General Eisenhower elected me
selected me to be his running mate. I won the election and I was vice president for President Eisenhower for 2 terms, which is a total of 8 years. After that, I ran against John F. Kennedy in 1960, but I lost that election. I will say, though, it was one of the closest elections in U.S. history. When I became president of the United States in 1968, I had many positive accomplishments. I helped bring peace about, and by visiting countries all over the world, including China and the Soviet Union. When I visited China, I helped end the Vietnam War. I also made sure the government didn't spend too much and kept the cost of things like gas, food, and clothes from rising. While I had a lot of good accomplishments, I'm the only president in history to resign or quit my job. I had to do this because of the Watergate scandal. What happened was burglars went into the Watergate building in Washington, D.C. and were caught breaking into the Democratic main office. And they were stealing politicians' secrets that could help me get reelected. I tried to cover this up, but in the end, I failed. I didn't want Congress to impeach me, so I had to quit my job. After that, I worked really hard to earn America's respect back. I wrote many books on politicians and world peace. I want you to remember me as a human, not a crook, and all the good I did in office. Things like help end the Vietnam War and bringing peace to the United States and serving my country during World War II. I know many people, when they hear my name, Richard Nixon, all they think about is Watergate. But I'm much more than that and contributed many good things to our country. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak to you today.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
Our long national nightmare is over. I think that means that we don't have to worry anymore. Hi, I am the 38th President Gerald Ford. I was born in Obama, Nebraska on July 14, 1913. I am married to Elizabeth and I have 4 kids. I died on December 26, 2006 in Rancho Mirage, California. I was a football player before being president. I was undefeatable. In 1934, I became the team's most valuable player. In 1935, I was elected All-American, one of the best players in college football. From 1935 to 1940, I coached football and boxing at Yale University. I worked for 25 years in Congress, and then in 1948, I became vice president. I became president after Nixon had a Watergate scandal and he had to leave office. I helped bring peace to the Middle East. I ended the Israel-Arab War in 1973. I also agreed to cut taxes and I held down the government spending. I want the audience to remember that I was the first president not elected by the people. Thank you for listening to my speech.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
Okay, you can do with what you have to do, and sometimes you can do it even better than you think you can. I think this means if you try hard to do something, you can do it better than you think. I am President James Carter, and I am the 39th president, but people call me Jimmy. I was born on October 1, 1924, in the plains of Georgia. I grew up in a house with no electricity. I married a girl named Rosalind Carter, and I have 4 children named Jack, Chip, Jeff, and Amy. My brother Billy also worked on a peanut farm, although he was allergic to peanuts. Sometime later, I went to Naval Academy after high school to become a nuclear submarine engineer. I created the Department of Education, and I helped the National State Park System, and I also helped Israel and war. And after I was president, I won the Nobel Peace Prize, and I also built homes for the poor. I don't have a part where I said I remember how to remember me by. So thank you for listening to my speech.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
America is too great for small dreams. I think this quote means that you should believe in what you can do if you have a lot of time and space to do it. Good morning, parents and children of Room 14. I am Ronald Reagan, and I was the 40th President of the United States of America. I was born on February 6, 1911, in Tampico, Illinois. I grew up in a small town in Illinois, and I was an outgoing, handsome boy. When I got older, I got into acting and acted until college. After graduation from college, I worked as a sportscaster in the radio office. I later got back into acting. I went to Hollywood and hosted 2 TV shows and appeared in movies. In 1940, I married Jane Wyman, but later divorced in 1949. Later in 1952, I married Nancy Davis and had 4 kids: Maureen Elizabeth, Michael Edward, Patricia Ann, and Ronald Prescott. Nancy was my second wife and also my last. She started a fundraiser to get all people away from drugs. Some of my accomplishments before being president were being a skilled speaker in Hollywood acting, and acting was my profession. I made 52 films while acting. After a while acting, I became a sports announcer, and I was also one of the most popular sports announcers in sports history. One day I started watching the news and got really into politics. I decided to run for president. I won the election on behalf of the Republican Party. I was the oldest president ever elected at the age 69. When I was in the office, I focused on several key issues such as making government smaller and improving relations with the Soviet Union. I accomplished much, but some of my solutions made more problems, such as large national debt. One day, a man named John Hinckley Jr. tried to assassinate me. I survived and got back into the office. Meanwhile, when I was out, George W.H. Bush, the vice president, worked for me. When I got back into the office, I worked to stop nuclear war. I also communicated with other countries to stop regular war. I tried to cut taxes and lower government spending. The company Jelly Belly made red, white, and blue jelly beans in my honor. I put them on my desk office. I accomplished much in my presidency, which made me very famous. I was called the Great Communicator because of skilled speaking, and I was the oldest president to ever run an office. And I was the first person to go to college in my family. I died on June 5th, 2004 at the ripe of age 93. I want the audience to remember that I was a very smart and intelligent man. Thank you for listening to my speech.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
America is never wholly herself unless she is acknowledged in the high moral principle. We as people have such a purpose today. It is to make the nation, make kinder the face of the nation and gentler the face of the world. This means we as Americans need to do the right thing. We need to be kind to everyone, and this may make the world a better place. Good morning, Room 14. I am George Herbert Walker Bush.
the 41st President of the United States of America. I was born June 12, 1924 in Milton, Massachusetts. My parents are Prescott Sheldon Bush and Dorothy Walker Bush. My nickname is Poppy. This name was given to me by my uncles. I now have a great-granddaughter who is named Poppy in honor of me. I graduated from Yale University. I got married to Barbara Bush. I had 6 kids, 4 boys, 2 girls. I had a son named George W. Bush. He became president after Bill Clinton. I am a Republican. My accomplishments before I was president are being a World War II pilot. I was the youngest pilot in World War II. I was the first president who had been head of the CIA. I was president from 1989 to 1993. When I was president, I started the Persian Gulf War in 1991. A U.S.-led United Nations offensive pushed Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein and his troops out of Kuwait during Operation Desert Storm. During my presidency, the Hubble Space Telescope launched. I signed the Civil Act of 1991, and race riots happened in Los Angeles, California. I even raised taxes after saying, "Read my lips, no new taxes." I want you to remember I went to Yale University. I was the youngest World War II pilot, and I pushed Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait. Thank you, boys and girls, for listening to my speech in room 14.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
We all do better when we work together. Our differences do matter, but our common humanity matters more. This quote means that even though we are all different, we can do better when we work together. Hello, boys and girls. I'm William Jefferson Clinton, but most people call me Bill Clinton. And I was the 42nd President of the United States. I was born on August 19th, 1946 in Hope, Arkansas. My dad died in a car accident, leaving my mom to raise me. My family is my wife, Hillary Clinton, and my daughter, Chelsea Clinton. I wish my wife, Hillary, was president now. As a young man, in 1963, I shook hands with President John F. Kennedy. I attended Georgetown University, Oxford University, and Yale Law School, University Law School. After I returned to Arkansas, where I was elected Attorney General, and then Governor. I became the youngest governor the country had seen in 40 years. I served for 12 years as governor, and some of my accomplishments were improving the educational system and getting big businesses to spend money in the state. In 1992, at the age of 46, I became the 3rd youngest president. My biggest accomplishment was improving the economy and increasing the country's wealth. This included getting rid of the debt and creating millions of new jobs, improving conditions for American people. Another accomplishment I'm proud of is making schools better for everyone. I was elected for a 2nd term after leaving the White House. I created the William J. Clinton Foundation, did public speaking, and helped people around the world. I was also the only president to win a Grammy Award for Best Spoken Word Album. I would like to be remembered for being the president who brought the economy to its highest heights and helping America. Thank you for listening to my speech.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
I was not elected to serve one party, but to serve one nation.
This quote means that I am here to serve all the people of the United States of America, not just one group. I am George W. Bush, the 43rd President of the United States. I was born July 6, 1946 in New Haven, Connecticut. I am married to Laura Welch Bush and have 2 daughters, Barbara and Jenna. My father, George H. Bush, was the 41st President of the United States and served 1 term. My mother, Barbara Bush, was the First Lady of the United States and founded the Barbara Bush Foundation for Family Literacy. I grew up in Texas. Later, I attended Yale University. I also trained as a fighter pilot in the Texas Air National Guard. I then went to Harvard University and got my master's degree. After, I returned to Texas and worked in the oil industry. In 1995, I ran for governor and I was elected. I helped cut taxes in Texas and I worked for welfare reform. My love for politics grew and I knew I wanted to help the American people. So I decided to run for president like my father, George H. Bush, as a Republican. I became president in 2001 for 2 terms. During my first term, something called 9/11 happened. On September 11th, 2001, terrorists called Al-Qaeda hijacked 4 planes and ran 2 of them into the Twin Towers in New York City, killing 3,000 people. All Americans were shocked and grieving. It was a huge tragedy. All Americans America had not been attacked on its own soil since Pearl Harbor in World War II. I declared war on terrorism and have been trying to defeat terrorists ever since. Another major accomplishment during my presidency was to sign the NCLB, No Child Left Behind Act. It was supposed to improve the nation's schools. It was a mix of new requirements, new incentives for teachers and school districts to get funding. It was supposed to help students do better and be successful. The act expanded the role of the federal government in education. Critics say that NCLB created too many standardized tests and that it stopped students and teachers from exploration in classrooms. After my presidency, I returned to Texas and gave many local speeches in the community. I also wrote my memoirs in 2010. I had a great life. I was the governor of Texas and a 2-term president of the United States. I helped fight against terrorism, and I also put children's education first. I would like to be remembered as a great citizen in the U.S. and someone who tried his best to help the American people. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your time.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
Aloha, boys and girls. I am Barack Obama, born on August 4th, 1961, in Honolulu, Hawaii. As a very young boy, I lived in Indonesia. In 1983, I graduated from Columbia University in New York City. I moved to Chicago, Illinois, where I began working as a community organizer and helped many people get jobs. I returned to school and entered Harvard Law School in Cambridge, Massachusetts. In 1992, I married Michelle Robinson, and I began teaching at the University of Chicago. I led Illinois' Project Vote. Project Vote helped more African Americans get involved in elections. And I was elected to Illinois State Senate in the Democratic Party. I have 2 beautiful daughters, Malia and Sasha. I won the election to the U.S. Senate. In February 2007, I would announce I would run for U.S. President. On January 20th of 2009, I took office as the 44th President. And the first African American president. I was elected for 2 terms. One of my favorite phrases is "win the future." Thank you for listening to my speech, boys and girls.
Woodrow Wilson.
Franklin Delano Roosevelt. JFK!
There you go.
I am Gerald Ford. Jimmy Carter.
I'm amazing.
George H.W.